leave this current state of release language and go into a little building tension language period for about 2.5 months.
Wonderful. Well, I love your work, and keep it up. Thanks so much for having me on, Captain Jack.
You're welcome. Have a good night. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Calling. Yeah.
Bye.
You know, the gold and silver market has been kind of all over the place recently, hasn't it? I mean, I was watching it for a little while there, just as the bailout package. I like to still refer to it as that. Got into.
No, I'm sorry. I have to correct you. What you were watching was the televised reports of the illusionary paper gold and silver market.
Oh.
If you actually had gone on out and tried to buy gold or silver, you would find yourself in an entirely different market.
Oh, yeah.
So, for instance, they're theoretically selling gold or silver. Let's take gold. I think it's like around $800 or something on the spot market. But if you actually try and obtain a gold coin, at least in any of the areas of the planet that I've surveyed and my local region, you'll be paying several $100s above what they're quoting as their little base price. I think that for me to actually obtain a gold coin in my town here, I would have to spend $1,300 or $1,400.
Man. Well, wasn't there also a wait? I mean, there were some people that were buying gold, and they were actually being told, well, you got like a 6-month wait before you can get your hands on it's bullion, I believe it was.
I don't know about gold because I don't have enough money to buy gold, but I do have an experience. I do have an experience with silver, in which I wanted to buy a small quantity of silver coins as if you will, a retirement. And this small quantity had been promised to me by a local. It took me forever to find anybody in the state that even had any. And these guys are at a local mint up north of me arranged to get it to me. I committed the funds to it, and they said, well, it'll probably take 6 weeks, and it ended up taking 18. And we're not talking hundreds of coins. We're talking under 50 coins.
Jeez.
So, and this is just regular old bullion silver. So obtaining the physical is becoming quite difficult. I also know from subscribers and friends in foreign parts like Ukraine and a few of the other areas that the smuggling trade is no longer accepting any kind of paper currency related to the dollar, and that they're even discouraging the use of euros, and that this has put a big pressure on various forms of silver as currency throughout that part of the planet where a lot of goods are moved under the government radar. This will become very important because that's going to be a huge portion of the new economy that will emerge in 2009. As the dollar dies, a whole lot of things are predictable on their face, one of which is that the gray and black markets will become very dominant. And the government, used to be, the government of the United States was financed by our taxes. But the entire tax collection from all of the citizens and corporations of the United States now does not account for 1/4 of the revenues that the government spends. So they're spending 3/4 of their revenue in the form of debt. When that goes away, it's going to severely impact the government, going to cause all kinds of ripples like disgruntled employees coming on out and telling us the actual truth of what's been going on for decades as whistleblowers, because they won't be being paid anymore, and the threats against them will seem less harsh. But also we're going to see other effects in the sense of the new economies that will be emerging will be more local-based, the successful ones anyway, will be extremely locally focused, and to a certain extent, it's a form of protectionism to the point where you even turn your back on your own federal government and say, we can do without you because we have to.
Yes, indeed. Let's see here. Some of the emails coming in. It says, Captain Jack, don't remember where I saw it, but one of Clif's predictions were a so-called evangelical shame event.
No, it was the evangelical unburdening. Okay, and they took it as, and there was indeed a lot of the language about shame on it, but, and again, that was probably our monkey mind and our interpretation. That event, that process has begun. It began with the pointing of this purpose-driven fellow from some saddle something church in California to go and give the invocation for Obama. That started the whole process. That led to the visible scrubbing of his website to remove all of the hate language that was anti-gay on it. And they started removing shame items from their visible presence. So all that language has started to manifest. Now what we're waiting for is the next shoe to drop, so to speak, which will get into some kind of a scandal that, as usual, will involve money and sex. And in this case, it'll be some religious leaders that will be say, perverted, that will cause another ripple of shame to run through that particular community. So we're seeing the language manifest. So we were actually pretty accurate on that, and had no idea that there was even anybody officially to give any kind of a religious blessing on these things, because I never really paid that much attention to inauguration and so on.
Yes.
And so when it occurred at the time, it was like, boy, that was pretty good timing, actually.
Yes.
But it was unburdening. And indeed, as I say, the shame items have started to show up. The website of this particular pastor before and after his appointment has distinctive changes with, I think we found 1,300 contexts that had been removed. So 1,300 noun-verb groups.
Very interesting. All right, we're at the bottom of the hour. Got to take our last break of the night, and when we come back, we'll reopen the phone lines for you to call in and ask questions here before 09 gets nice and settled in on the East Coast. Here's a question that came in from a listener. It says, hey, Jake, do you think Clif could possibly throw in his 2 cents on President-elect Obama's mention of a domestic militia that would be more well-funded than the military, or just as well-funded as the military, excuse me? We have seen some blending of military personnel with police personnel. We have seen that. As a matter of fact, there was this report that came out of, I believe it was California, somewhere in California, I think Orange County, about them observing at a DUI checkpoint or something like that. Raised a lot of controversy. We'll see what Clif has to say. Do you have any input on that, Clif?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of the linguistics that seem to suggest that the controllers that are Obama's, that pull his strings, and everybody else that's a politician, wants to rely on more fascistic attempts to control the populace. They have a number of issues as we go through a very radical change for our species on our planet. If we take a large view, we can see why they want to do these things, which is that if we think of the Earth, and because we have no other planet to mess with at the moment, as a petri dish, then we're a colony of bacteria that has reached the edge of the petri dish. That is to say, we've killed off the middle and have gradually moved out towards the edge of the petri dish, eating all of the nutrients there, and we've run up against that glass wall. Yeah. And so we're at a point now, resource-wise, where the human species consumes about 40% of the planetary biota annually. Buckminster Fuller and others had postulated that if we'd crossed the barrier where we were consuming 46% of the biota, we were on the death spiral at that point towards extinction, because the biota could not replenish from year to year, and therefore humans would begin to die off, and this was the ultimate penalty to be paid for in the form of overpopulation. But the powers that be need a certain level of population to maintain their luxuriant lifestyles. And without that, they suffer, and they don't want to suffer. So they need to have a population, but they need to control it to exist on fewer and fewer resources as they take more and more control. Less than 1% of the populace of the planet controls 90% of its resources. 2.5 billion people live on less than $2 a day. They're about to be joined by another 2 billion people as the dollar collapses, who will be forced to exist in a way that they've never encountered before, without the dollar as their support and the easy flow of goods back and forth, the shipment of food, etc. So this is going to put a huge stress on what is known as the social contract, which is between you and your government. It says if you behave yourself and don't do things like riot and take certain extreme actions in their view, they will provide for you. But real soon they won't be able to provide for you, and therefore the conundrum exists. And one of their control mechanisms is through the elimination in our country of Posse Comitatus Act, and therefore allowing the military to train and direct local law enforcement, as well as the idea of forming in essence, a brown shirt movement, a paramilitary movement, where it would have all of the disciplinary and hierarchical structure of the military, which means they're on top and you're on the bottom, and you take their orders. But it wouldn't be armed and as well as the military, and its goal would be different, which would be to inculcate a mindset of control in a large group of people that could then be used to control the others that you couldn't control mentally. The problem both with the military and the lack of posse comitatus is that you now find that instantly Every person in the country that is not a member of the elite is part of, that has more in common with the lower members of society than anyone else. In other words, you can be a high-placed corporate person, but if you're not a member of the elite ruling class and controlling vast amounts of money, you can run afoul of the legal system, and instantly, because the legal or the law enforcement, which used to be peace officers who used to try and just keep the peace, now are there to enforce laws, and they've been trained by the military to see the citizenry as the enemy, because bear in mind the military only has one function, to defeat the enemy. They only deal in things in those kind of terms. They've passed that terminology on to law enforcement. So law enforcement is no longer dealing with citizens, they're dealing with the enemy. And thus you see all this extreme behavior when as soon as they get you, they try and beat you into submission. Because you're not a citizen in their view, you're an enemy at that point because you've come afoul of their particular behavioral ethos, which we call laws or ordinances or so on, right? And so that's our real problem. They will attempt to do so. They must, in terms of the power that be, have I think there's something pressuring them. Either the idea that we've run out of resources and they must do this control, or something even larger than that, looming on the near horizon, like maybe 2012, that frightens them, and they're really afraid of things getting out of hand before then, so that they're not in control at this particular time. There seems to be a lot of evidence in the language that that is the case. So it wouldn't surprise me that they would attempt to implement any number of civilian control population or civilian population control mechanisms under the guise of various different kinds of new organizations, which will all basically come down to some sort of military-style hierarchy with graduated levels of control.
Yes. You know, we've seen I've seen videos come through in my email from people that, like dash cams from police officers. One in particular that stands out in my mind was a woman that was driving along. She got stopped at one of these checkpoints where they make sure everyone has their insurance. And she wouldn't give him any information. She wouldn't give her ID. She did nothing wrong. And because she was resisting, and he said that he can't let her go until she provides her papers, they arrested her. And then they were going through her car, and she had all this information about the Constitution and so on and so forth. And
that made her a radical. Yeah.
Yes, it made her a radical, and they were like, man, she's into some weird stuff here, and so on and so forth. She was later cleared. I mean, she didn't do anything wrong. She shouldn't have even been arrested. But that is really, they have a law for everything. They can arrest you for anything they want to arrest you for.
And they can arrest you simply because they want to, and then apply some reason afterward.
Yes.
And that's the shift over from a soft form of fascism that we saw under the Bushistas here, where they said, yes, you have the right to free speech, but only in that little tiny area of the city over there where no one really cares. And you're miles away from whatever event you want to protest. And so that's been removed. You do not have the right of free speech. And freedom of the press is a myth. It is only true of those 5 people that own all the corporations and own all the presses. This has got them rather annoyed, though, because the Internet is forming a real problem for them and awakening a large number of people in the form of all forms of media across the Internet, including the radio, and that actually is going to be their next censorship scrubbing thing, will be Internet radio.
Oh, yeah.
They're applying it now with the Australian gateway approach, the Internet approach, to try and isolate the whole continent of Australia and control all of their media sources through this soft censorship, which would apply to news articles and everything else. But now I'm hearing from people in positions of to know that indeed the government is attempting to do radio-style real-time, real-world substitutions on language,